Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. Naruto meets his mother and unlocks a forbidden summon. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. The next two combatants walked down as they Karui was a dark-skinned kunoichi with long spiky red hair and amber eyes who wore a long, short-sleeved dress with frilly edges complete with something that looked like the Kumogakure flak jacket, two simple yellow earrings, fishnet stockings, thigh-high boots with white soles and a hitai which she wears like a bandana, and she was carrying a long sword on her back. On the other hand, Shizuka was a fair-skinned girl of average height with an athletic yet curvaceous build with green eyes and waist-length black hair in a Heim-style cut tied in a high ponytail with short bangs and chin-length strands framing her face. She wore a black hitai and wore her village's form-fitting kunoichi uniform, which was gray-colored with a right shoulder guard, gray gloves, and an opening in her shirt, which revealed some of her sizable cleavages. May the 11th match begin, Hayate called out as both kunoichi charged at each other. Naruto once more glared down at the Kumo ninja as the blonde Kumo Jinchuriki walked over to Naruto. "Why are you glaring at my teammate brother?" she asked Naruto. Naruto looked at her with narrowed eyes. "How about that Kumo tried to kidnap a good friend of mine when she was younger as well as my mother when she was younger," Naruto said to his sibling of burden, "and let me not forget that my clan's homeland is no more than rubble because of your village," he hissed as his Rinnegan looked into the Kumo Jinchuriki. Yo, you got to let that go. Our villages are seeking peace, so set your mind at ease," the Kumo sensei rapped at Naruto, who looked at him with a raised bow. "My brother brought the body of the man back, and he would like to apologize for the attack," he added as the female Jinchuriki sighed. "Sorry about my sensei," she said as she bowed to the ninja who looked at the man. "He dreams of becoming a world-famous rapper," she added as the man looked over to her. "Yugito, why are you being harsh, so stop being an ass," he told her as the now-named Yugito's eyes started to twitch. Naruto let the words from both of them go through his head. And he knew that they were telling the truth. Naruto looked to his mother, who looked at him with a caring smile. She even turned to Diana, and she was still smiling at him, so Naruto let out a sigh. "I apologize for what I was doing," Naruto said as he bowed to his Jinchuriki siblings. Both Yugito and her sensei turned to him and looked at him. Sakura smiled before she turned to Yugito. "You said that Naruto was your brother, so does that mean," she asked her, "that we're Jinchuriki?" Yugito asked Sakura, who nodded. "Yep, I'm the Jinchuriki of Matabi the Nibi," Yugito said as Sakura looked both amazed and confused. "And so were most of the people. Now my name, know my fame, don't be lame," the Kumo sensei started to rap as his students sighed. "Eight tails, that's me, da rapping, Killer Bee, Jinchuriki of Gyuki," the now Killer Bee said as everyone looked at him. "You named your Biju?" Kakashi asked them as they both looked at him confused. No, they were named by the Rakudo Sennin," Killer Bee said as people looked amazed. He then looked at Naruto's eyes, and with the eyes of Thin Nin, Bee added, "But Yugito beat him." "With your Rinnegan being the eyes of the Rakudo Sennin," Yugito told Naruto as the blonde going crimson nodded. "Yay, he came to me and told me before blessing me and my children with the Rinnegan," Naruto told her as Yugito looked amazed before he turned to Sakura. "And no, I do not know the name of the Kyuubi," he told her as she nodded. Karui and Shizuka were fighting kunai to katana, neither giving an inch to the other. Shizuka then slipped past the katana, kicked away from the Kumo kunoichi to the side, and held a kunai at Karui's throat. Hayate walked over to them and saw that Shizuka had another kunai to Karui's liver and called out, "Winner Shizuka of Nadeshiko village." Shizuka removed the kunai, bowed to Karui and then returned to her team as Karui did the same, cursing her way up the stairs as the names shuffled once more. Artemis looked over to Bee with a smile. "Your student did good," she said as Bee nodded, "but I think her opponent was holding back," Artemis added as Bee nodded once more. "What do you mean she matched her?" Samui said as she walked over. "Exactly, think back what you said, and you will realize that it's a fact she won," Bee said. People looked confused as they all turned to Artemis. "If I'm right that Shizuka is the princess of Nadeshiko and was trained to take down a platoon of genin," Artemis said as Bee nodded, "and so that means that she matched your teammate so that she would not feel down on herself," the goddess told as Samui nodded. "That is both cool and not cool at the same time," Samui said before Naruto laughed as Samui turned to him. What? She asked Naruto. Just a thought, and it's that if she was fighting a shinobi would she fight on the same level, or would she go all out on them? Naruto asked aloud, and I just find that funny, Datbeo, he added as Artemis turned to him. And you were right as the law of that village, Artemis said as Naruto looked at her and saw that she had a tweaking eye. What is it? Naruto asked her. Your grandfather beat a Nadeshiko Kunoichi once. And instead of following their rules, he told her that she must not follow them. And so she saw that their students or children would fight, and if he had a son and beat her daughter, they must marry. Artemis growled as Naruto looked at his mother confused. Then when asking to become Aloys, the daughter of the woman that your grandfather defeated, met your father who turned her down, and now her daughter is here, and I can't help but think that this time it's going to stick, she added as glared at the ground. Which grandfather? Naruto asked her. Your father's father, Diana growled as the next two names were picked out. Guran of Kusa vs Omoi of Kumo. Omoi is a young, dark-skinned Kumo nin with short, spiky, white hair and dark eyes accentuated with eyelashes curving upwards from the corners. He wore a dark outfit consisting of an overlong shirt with a hood, red bandage hand guards, Kumogakure shin guards, a black hitai-8, and something that looked like with Kumogakure flak jacket, and he carried a long sword on his back. Guran wore a short teal kimono with a gray turtleneck and short sleeves with a jade green rope belt around her waist, red shorts, light purple wristbands and navy blue sandals. She had strands of hair that framed her face were shorter with dark teal hitai-8 on her right bicep. Hayate stood in the middle of the two of them as he looked between them before he raised his hand. Begin, he called out as he jumped back. Omoi drew his sword and started running at Guran before he froze. He could not move. Wow, Naruto muttered as he looked down at the battlefield. People looked amazed by what they saw. From under Guran's feet and covering Omoi from the waist down is covered in crystal. Is this a Kekkei Genkei? Kakashi asked as he looked at it with his dojutsu. She sent her chakra across the floor to make it crystal, and Omoi stepped on it. She trapped him, Yugito said as she shook her head. Naruto narrowed his Rinnegan as he looked at the crystal before drawing everyone's attention. It's a Kekkei Genkei, alright, and it's made of earth release and something else, but I'm having trouble seeing what that other is, Naruto told them as they looked amazed. You can see that? Asuma asked him, and Naruto at the blonde going crimson's nod. Asuma looked down. Does the other element have a color? He asked Naruto. Naruto looked intensely at the crystal, so much so that his veins bulged near his temples. Lee turned to his teammate and cocked his head to the side. Is he activating Byakugan? He asked Neji, who looked at Naruto. It looks like it, Neji said as he blinked at Naruto. No, he's using a technique from a Mangekyo Sharingan, Diana said as she decided to watch for a while. It only looks like he's using the Byakugan, she said as Neji nodded. The veins around Naruto's eyes returned to normal after he blinked a few times. Alright, I have it, Naruto said as the people around him turned to him. Crystal release is made up of both earth release and lightning release, Naruto told them as they looked down at the crystals. Omoi tried to move as he called electricity to his sword. I can't lose because if I do, Kumo will be seen as weak, and then Raikage-sama will punish the one responsible by having them help B-sensei make a rap video, Omoi yelled out as everyone looked at Omoi questionably. Naruto and Sakura looked at each other, then turned to Diana, who looked confused. Kakashi blinked and cocked his head to the side. Tenten looked at Neji, who shrugged. Kurenai shook her head at what was just said. Hinata looked confused. Temari looked at her sensei, who looked amazed by the stupidity of the Kumo nin. There he goes again, Karui said as Choji turned to her. What do you mean? He asked her. Omoi has this habit of being pessimistic and blowing it out of proportion, Yugito said as the other Kumo ninja nodded. Hayate walked over to Omoi. Can you move? He asked the Kumo genin, who shook his head. Winner of the 12th match goes to Guran of Kusa, he called out as he turned to Guran. He pointed at the crystal around Omoi, and then it broke off him as they both walked back to their teams, with Omoi walking back with his head hung low. The names got shuffled once more as Omoi returned to his team and found them talking to the Konoha ninja. What happened while I was down there? Did B-sensei Current the Konoha nin believe that he could make music? Omoi asked before he dummy slapped by said person. But before something could be said, the next names were picked quickly. Temari of Suna vs Kintsuchi. The remaining Oto ninja walked down as Temari jumped down and unconnected her fan from her back. As Kin reached the battlefield and met Temari there, she looked ready to fight as she placed her hand in her pouch. Begin, Hayate called out as he jumped back, and Kin threw Senbon at Temari, who moved her fan in front of her and opened it to show a purple circle, and a blast of wind blew the Senbon away. First moon, Temari said as Kin's eyes shot wide. Wind release, she muttered as she looked at Temari, who nodded. She then looked up at her sensei to see snake-like eyes looking down at her. And they held a message. Do not fail me. So Kin pulled out more Senbon and threw them at Temari, who opened her fan more to show a second purple circle and send a blast of wind out that sent the Senbon back again, but this time it was more powerful. Kin had some of the Senbon stuck in her. Second moon, Temari said as she looked at Kin. There is only one left before I end this match, so do yourself a favor and quit now, she told the Oto Kunoichi. But Kin, even though she knew she would not hit the Suna Kunoichi, sent more Senbon out. Still, Temari fully opened her fan and sent another gust of wind. Third moon, she said before she took hold of her fan and waved it in Kin's direction. Kamedachi no Jutsu, Temari called out as she sent out currents of wind to collide with each other, making something that looked a cyclone that had Kin trapped in the center. Kin was getting cut up by the countless blades of wind within the cyclone. She was getting hit at all sides by wind currents. She did not know what was happening before her world went dark. As she fell, Temari closed her fan, and Kin fell on it with her back, landing on the fan. Temari was named the winner as she walked back up. That match was brutal, Naruto muttered as people around him nodded. It goes to show that there are people younger than yourself but stronger, Kuranai said as the other sensei nodded. Camaran Yuminohara vs Kiba in Izuka. If you can guess who Camaran Yuminohara is, you may have a cookie. The Kiri female Jinchuriki walked down, as did Kuranai's final student and Hana's little brother. Like most of his clan, Kiba has messy brown hair, sharp black eyes with vertical slit-like pupils, pronounced canine teeth, and nails that he can change into claws. He also has the distinctive red fang markings of the Inuzuka clan on his cheeks. Kiba's attire consisted of dark grayish pants reaching to his calves and a gray, hooded fur-lined coat, with the hood usually placed on his head, with a blue forehead protector and blue sandals. At his side was his Ninken partner, who was a small dog with white and some brown fur on his ears and resembled a Great Pyrenees. He was being carried on Kiba's head with the dog's eyes squinted, appearing closed, and he had a brown nose, as well as brown patches on his ears and a brown outline around his mouth, and the fur on top of his head is styled to somewhat resemble a mohawk. Camaran and Kiba stood in the middle as Hayate looked them over before setting his gaze on Camaran. She looks familiar, he thought as he raised his hand. May the 14th match begin, Hayate called out. Shikyaku no Jutsu, Kiba called out as he sank to the floor on all fours with chakra coming off him. Camaran looked at him with no emotion as Kiba growled at her before she held out her hand, gained a puff of smoke, and a weapon appeared. It looked to be a cross between a trident, a bishaman yari, a Japanese spear, and a ji, a Chinese halberd with a crystalline appearance that bears a blue horsehair tassel. Similarly, the two side blades are straight with concave edges as opposed to the usual crescent blades of the bishaman yari, and the end of the trident turns into a corkscrew shape. But she just held the trident in her hand as she twirled it, and water formed from the corkscrew bottom at the end. Kiba did not heed the trident as he threw something at his Ninken, who ate it, and it turned the dog's fur red. You ready, Akamaru? Kiba growled at the hound as both ran at Camaran. She spun her trident around as water spewed out of the corkscrew, forming a circle of water and making a mirror out of the water before she hooked one of the trident's blades on the mirror and flipped around. After a few turns and a second, Kiba and Akamaru came out of the mirror. As the copies ran into the real ones, they pushed the real ones back before they burst like water balloons, and Camaran spun her trident once. Kiba and Akamaru shook off the water on them as Naruto looked down at them. She has good control over water, Naruto muttered as he looked at his Jinchuriki. Yay, Yugito said as she watched the match closely. From what Matabi tells me, Isobu, the Sanbi, give his Jinchuriki the ability to control and make Kurel, a strong water affinity and a Genjutsu mist, she added as everyone looked amazed. Not going to move, Kiba growled at her. Well then, let's go, Akamau, he called out at Akamaru and jumped on his back. Kiba, Don't let your ego get the better of you, Kuranai thought as Hana approached them. Kuranai smiled before she looked down at her student. Junjin Bunshin, Kiba called out as Akamaru turned into a clone of Kiba while still on his back. Supinaru Samakogo, Camaran called out as she formed water beneath her that turned into a drill-like vortex that shot at Kiba and Akamaru. Hana turned to Kuranai before she started to shake her head. I don't think that Kiba's going to win, she said as Kuranai nodded. After hearing Camaran's voice, Kakashi thou narrowed his lone eye as he looked at her. Who is she, he thought as he looked over her. Diana switched back to Artemis and then looked down at the battlefield as she heard the voice before her eyes widened slightly. Is that, she asked herself. Seeing that he was constantly getting pushed back, Kiba looked over to Akamau, and then they both jumped into the air and started spinning at high speed before they made their way to Camaran. She jumped in the air, and seeing that one of them was coming, she formed a shell on her back. The drilling cyclone bounced off the shell as Camaran held out her trident and pointed it at the oncoming cyclone. Boritekusu Karashu, she called out as water burst out of the trident and shot at the cyclone and not only pushed it back but forced it to stop spinning. But she forgot about the other as it hit her in the side, which sent her flying to the ground on her back, her jacket around her mouth cut. Shit, I got overconfident, she swore in her head. Well, you did spend 13 years in a coma, her Biju told her as she stood up, and I had half my power in somebody else, so I could not heal you fully until I fully returned to you, he added as Camaran nodded. Both vortexes go by the name Kiba and Akamaru, around and head back to her. Camaran held up her trident before she slammed it into the ground, as water burst out from under her before she started to go thou a tone of seals. She then ended up on the bird shield as the water started moving, rising and taking shape like a serpentine dragon. Suiten, Suiryuden no Jutsu, Camaran called out as she sent the water dragon at the cyclones, and it pushed them back. Kiba and Akamau, who were still transformed and looked like Kiba, stopped their cyclones as they looked at Camaran. And found that she was running at them, leaving her trident in the ground as she formed the shell on her back once more in a single long armored tail before she jumped into the air and then curled up into a ball and started to roll at Kiba at high speed. With Camaran on the attack this time and Kiba jumping around to try to dodge the attacks soon, he was hit in the chest by the rolling Kiri Kunoichi. The people on the observation decks were watching in amazement as both Hana and Naruto gained a look in their eyes. What you thinking? Sakura asked Naruto. Well, I was thinking about making something like that but me version, Naruto said as he started to go over plans about how he could do it. What would you call it? Artemis asked her son as Naruto turned to her. Is it going to be a taijutsu or a normal ninjutsu? She asked as Naruto closed his eyes as he started to think. Before they could speak more, the ball named Camaran jumped in the air, stopped rolling and formed a seal familiar to Team 7. Kage Bunshin, no jutsu, she called out as two clones formed next to her, and then all three of them turned into balls and made their way to Kiba. Now that is just not fair, Choji said as he looked down at the battlefield. Not only does she have a jutsu that is like my clan, but she has a better version, he whined as Asuma laughed at his student. That is life, Choji, Shikamaru said as she turned her head at the laugh that escaped Naruto's mouth. Shut up, you bastard, she hissed at him. Kiba and Akamaru were soon running out of steam, and it showed as more quickly Kiba moved out of the way of one of the rolling women. Another hit him in the side, and then he knew that it was over as one of the clones hit him in the chest and steamrolled over him. Soon followed by another, then another before, more quickly, a large cloud of dust formed. Everyone waited to see what had happened to Kiba and Akamaru, and when the smoke had cleared, it showed that both of them were knocked out as the three Camarans uncurled and stood up. Hayate walked over to Kiba and checked on him before he raised his hand. Winder, Camaran Yuminohara, he called out as Camaran's clones popped out as she walked over to her trident and picked it up before stopping and then walking over to Kiba. Hayate got ready to attack but said, I know medical ninjutsu, as Hayate let her pass. She knelt by the downed Kiba and held her hands over him as they started to glow green, and she began healing him. Now that is just strange, B said for once, not rapping as Naruto and Yugito nodded. What is? Kakashi asked him. She's a Jinchuriki, and she can perform medical ninjutsu, Artemis said, equally shocked as the Jinchuriki. Camaran then stood up and looked at the Hokage. who looked her in the eye before nodding slightly before she walked back to her team as the next two names were picked. Suigetsu Hazuka vs Han of Iwa. Han walked down as Camaran passed her teammate on the up. Suigetsu is a lean-built young man of average height with straight white hair, a light blue tint, and almond-shaped purple eyes. He has pointed teeth, one of which sticks out even when his mouth is closed. He wore a purple, sleeveless shirt with blue pants, sandals and a belt around his waist with water bottles attached to it, and he also wore another belt strapped to his chest, which he used to carry a sword that had all members of Team 7 looking amazed and shocked. Naruto blinked before turning to Sakura. "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Naruto asked her as she nodded. "Zabuza's blade," Naruto asked as the Kiri ninja looked over to them. "You knew Zabuza-sama?" Chojuro asked as he walked over to them, and Team 7 nodded. "Can you tell me how he died and why Kubikiribocho was in the ground with his body?" he asked as the Kiri-sensei nodded as Hayate started the next match. "Well, he was hired by Gato, who was trying to take over the wave," Sakura started as Naruto nodded. "Mateen was sent there on the pretense of AC rank mission, but when we met Zabuza, it was bumped up to an A- rank," Kakashi added as the Kiri ninja nodded as Suigetsu held his hands out on finger pistols and started to shoot water bullets at Han. "We fought him and his apprentice twice, with the second time leading to the apprentice's death first before Gato, turning on Zabuza and then Zabuza killed him, but the wounds that gained killed him," Naruto said as the swordsman nodded. "As for the sword in the ground we were using it as a grave marker," he added at Sakura and Kakashi's nod. "I see," the sensei said as he took a breath in before he sighed. "Thank you for telling me. I'll inform the Mizukage about this so that she knows what happened," he said as Kakashi nodded before stopping. "Sorry, did you say she?" Kakashi asked as Artemis also turned to him. "Don't you mean he, as the young dame Mizukage, is in charge?" Kakashi added as the man nodded. "Did you not know that our tyrant of a cage was killed and replaced?" he asked the Konoha nin, who turned to the Hokage. Along with most other villages, they did not know a new Mizukage existed. "I did say the current Mizukage has the ability of Houshoku Haki," Hiruzen said with a smile. "Oh," Guy said as he looked at the Kiri-sensei. "Anyway, I'll inform her, and so you will have the reward for the information," he said as he turned back to the field to see that Suigetsu had trapped Han in a large ball of water. "And just like that, Suigetsu has lost," he said as Camaran nodded as Chojuro looked confused. "What do you mean Utakata-sensei?" he asked. "The Gobi has the power over boil release," the now named Utakata said as Chojiro's eyes shot wide. "If Suigetsu stuck to Kenjutsu, he would have had a chance of winning, but now," the Jinchuriki said, shaking his head. And to prove his point, Han started to let out chakra as the water around him began to bubble. "What the?" Suigetsu said as he felt the water heat up until steam began to come off the ball of water. Suigetsu said as he let the square of a water drop as he held his hands before Han zoomed in on him with red chakra around his fists. Be punched the Kiri nin, and all Suigetsu could do was take each punch. And before Suigetsu knew it, he was knocked out. "He is not going to like that," Camaran said as Utakata nodded, and Hayate called the match and named Han the winner as Han walked back to his team. The 8 remaining people looked around as they waited for the next 2 names to be picked. Naruto had a small laugh, so Kakashi turned to him. "What is it?" he asked him. 3 of the remaining 8 are Jinchuriki, Naruto said as the Konoha Jonin looked around and found that Naruto was right as Naruto and Yugito hadn't gone yet or the Suna Jinchuriki. Kakashi looked at the board before saying, "Make that 2, he said before looking down at Naruto. "You're up," he told him as Naruto looked over and saw that Kakashi was right. But what shocked him was that it showed his full name. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki vs Kurotsuchi of Iwa. Kurotsuchi looked shocked, then murderous as she looked at Naruto as he jumped down. "Kurotsuchi," Roshi said as she turned to him, "Your grandfather does not want his blood or attack Konoha, so do not do anything rash," he told her as she also jumped down. They met in the middle as people looked shocked by Naruto's middle name, but then they saw that Kurotsuchi glared at Naruto. And Naruto was doing the same to her. "I'm going to destroy you for what your father did to my village," Kurotsuchi growled at him. "Then I'll do the same in the name of my clan's men," Naruto growled back. Hayate looked back at Hiruzen as Artemis sighed. "Why does he have to be more like me than Minato?" she asked aloud. Hiruzen nodded, so Hayate turned back to the battle to see both of them were ready to fight. He raised his hand and then brought it down. "Begin," he called out. The two ran at each other with a fist cocked back, with Kurotsuchi's fist becoming stone and growing slightly while Naruto's fist was glowing golden orange. And then the fists met, but with the power that both of them were using, they were both pushed back before Kurotsuchi went out. The snake ran, and bird seals before the ground turned into spikes around Naruto, who grabbed the Yoto and took a swipe with it, sending out a thin blade of wind. And like in the forest, Tenten did not see a blade of wind. She saw a hawk flying down the rock spikes and heading for Kurotsuchi. Naruto's right fist moved out a small bit as rockets appeared out of his arm before he raised said arm and fired all the missiles at Kurotsuchi. The missiles surged around in the air before and then flew to where Kurotsuchi was, but a large dome of earth formed beneath her, shielding her from the explosions and the wind blade coming at her. The dome crumbled to the ground to find that Kurotsuchi was no longer there. Naruto cursed under his breath as he held his hands out. Shinra Tensei, Naruto called out as he sent out an invisible blast of chakra from around him. It hit Kurotsuchi, who was invisible, as Naruto turned to her. Naruto then appeared in front of Kurotsuchi, with his sword raised high. Kurotsuchi pulled out a kunai, and another kunai versus sword match happened. Artemis saw Kakashi look at the spot where Naruto once was before she looked back to see Naruto and Kurotsuchi fighting. "You've worked out his technique," she asked as he nodded to her. "He can change places with something within visual range, right?" he asked her as she held her hand out and rocked it side to side as if to say yes and no. But before she could say any more, Naruto formed another hand and went thou seals before placing a finger on Kurotsuchi's shoulder. "Raiden, Byakurai," he called out as a blast of lightning shot out of his finger and thou Kunoichi's shoulder. But she did not take the hit, lying down as she kicked straight up, her left leg hitting Naruto in the chin. But the two kept the sword and kunai in places as people watched the battle. "They're even," Han said to Roshi as the older Jinchuriki nodded. "It's a battle to see whose ideals are stronger and who has the bigger resolve," Baki told his students as Kurotsuchi pulled out a second kunai as Naruto stuck with the Yoto. "So you must not take your eyes off the battle at any moment," Asuma said to his three students, Ino, who had woken up to see the fight. As so, each sensei had told each student to watch who had the bigger resolve. "Avenge hundreds of Iwa ninja." Or, "Avenge hundreds of Uzumaki." No one could take their eyes off the fight as Naruto and Kurotsuchi cut each other up, but they did not care. In a twist of the fight, they both managed to disarm the other as Kurotsuchi's kunai flew into a wall that they became embedded in it, while the Yoto did the same but to the other side of them. Both of them jumped away from each other but not before launching a jutsu at the other. "Yoden, Sekaigyo no Jutsu, Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu," they called out. Kurotsuchi spat out a glob of quicklime as Naruto breathed a large fireball. Flames and quicklime met each other and became hardened rock as they fell to the floor. Naruto narrowed his eyes. "This is getting me nowhere," he thought before he held out a hand. "Bansho Tenin," he called out as Karachi was pulled off her feet and was heading straight for Naruto at an alarming rate uncontrollably, and Naruto raised his leg and made sure to aim for her neck and called out, "Ryu no Kyubi," and slammed Kurotsuchi into the ground so hard that the ground beneath her cracked on impact. Naruto looked down at Kurotsuchi, pulling his fist back and then shooting it forward into Kunoichi and going further into the ground, and all the air from her lungs was taken out. Kurotsuchi looked lost as Naruto opened his hand, as Yoto jumped out of the ground from where it had been invaded and spun out the air into Naruto's waiting hand. She looked up at him and felt fear him as he looked down at her. She saw a beast ready to kill her and send her to the Shinigami. "Do it," she said as she looked at Naruto, who just looked at her. "Come on, you monster, be like your clan of bloodthirsty warriors and take my life," she said as she slowly pickets herself off the floor. "No," Naruto said as he turned around and started walking away before stopping and then looking up to his mother, who smiled and nodded before he looked back at her. "I won this battle, and unlike Iwa, I don't take innocent life," Naruto told her as the Konoha ninja smiled as he continued walking away as Kurotsuchi looked at him before she fell back knocked out. As he walked off, he saw his mother looking at him as steam came off his body, and he rejoined his team as they saw that all his injuries had healed up. Hinata looked at him, seeing that he was all healed up, and put the pot she was holding away in her pouches. Kuranai smiled down at her. "Maybe next time," she told her student. Artemis looked at her son with a smile as the medial ninja took Kurotsuchi away. "I'm proud of you," and I have no doubt that your father and grandfather would as well, she told him as Naruto gained a small smile. But he could not help himself. Which grandfather? He asked her. Your Uzumaki grandfather, she said right back with a motherly smile. Before they could talk more, the next two names were picked. Hinata Hyuga vs Neji Hyuga. Hinata is a slender girl of fair complexion who, as a Hyuga, her most distinguishing trait is the Byakugan, giving her featureless lavender eyes, as she has dark blue hair that she keeps in a hime-cut hair that is cut just above her forehead akin to a bowl cut with chin-length strands framing her face. Hinata wore a cream-colored hooded jacket with a fire symbol on the upper sleeves and fur around the cuffs and hem with navy blue pants and kept her hitai loosely around her neck. Hinata met Neji in the middle of the area with Hayate standing between them. Hello ne Neji ni, Hinata said to him timidly. Naruto asked as he was hit over the head by his mother as he looked down. Don't curse around your mother, Artemis told him. Did Hinata ever say she had a bother? Ino asked Sakura, who shook her head. No, from what Neji told me, Hinata is the heiress of the Hyuga clan, and he is her cousin, Lee told them as they looked at him. Hinata-sama, I must ask you too, Neji started speaking before the voice of Kiba called out. Hinata fight, he said as everyone turned to him to see that he was getting held back by doctors. Show him who you are, Kiba said before his sister dragged him off as Artemis looked at her with a smile. Like brother, like sister, Hana heard in her head as she saw Artemis with a large smile. Hana said nothing before she went after her brother. Both Hyuga started activating their Byakugan as they both took a stance. The same stance. Begin, Hayate called out as Hyuga ran at each other with great speed and started hitting small points in the body. No one said a word as the cousins found fast as only a few could keep up with their eyes. What are they doing? Ino asked as she watched the fight. They're not hitting the other, Shikamaru added as she looked down at the fight. Wrong, Naruto said as they looked at him. They're hitting the Tenketsu, he told them, his eyes not leaving the battle. Those around him saw his eyes moving quickly as he saw every hit aimed at both Hyuga. And it's not looking good for Hinata, Naruto said as everyone looked at him. Neji is aiming to shut down her arms while Hinata is going to the main points where chakra forms, the blonde Uzumaki said as people saw both Artemis and Kakashi nod. All she needs to do is hit the right spot, and she can finish this match, Artemis said as Hinata started to push Neji back. But that was what he wanted. Neji went forward with a double strike, one aimed at Hinata's heart and the other at the upper part of Hinata's arm. Naruto closed his eyes as those around him looked at him before they realized what had happened. Neji had won. The strike that hit Hinata's heart made her cough up blood that fell onto her jacket as her eyes shot wide. And so Neji started to go harder in his assault on her as each hit was harder and faster than the last until Hinata fell to the floor and Neji began to walk away before a gasp was heard through the room. Neji stopped and turned around to see that Hinata was back on her feet. Why do you get back up? You're a failure to our clan, he told her, but she did not hear his words as she looked at him. You fight for nothing but hope when you have been fated to lose to me, Neji added. But once more, the words did not go down to her as she looked at him. That is where you were wrong, Hinata said as she struggled to stay standing. You are the one who is fighting for the hope that you can break the chains of the caged bird, Hinata said as Neji's face became murderous. And you said that I was fated to lose, but you are currently fighting fate yourself as you try to kill me, but we are no different, she told him as Neji laughed himself at her with a strike right at her heart. But the sensei and Hayate stopped him with Kakashi holding one arm while Kuranai was holding the other arm. Guy hooked his arm around Neji's neck as Hayate stood just in front of Neji with his sword. You won. Walk away, Kakashi said as Hinata collapsed to the floor coughing up blood. The care for the main branch is shown once more, Neji scoffed as Guy tightened his hold on his student. Naruto appeared next to her as his chakra chains shot out of him and into Hinata, and steam started to come off Hinata. Someone get a medic here now, Naruto called out as he allowed Hinata his healing ability. But it was working slowly. Neji was dragged back to the observation area as a medic came over and started to heal Hinata along with Naruto and Camaran jumping down as well as the three of them worked on healing as they downed Kunoichi. I must have a word with them, Hiruzen said as he watched with bated breath at the healing before Naruto retracted his chains with a sigh. The medic nodded in thanks as he rushed Hinata away, and Naruto took both him and Camaran back up to the observation area. She's going to live, Naruto said as people around him sighed as people made sure that Neji was nowhere near them in case Shino or Kuranai were to try and kill him. But before they could do anything, the next two names were picked. Gaara of the Sand vs Rock Lee. The Ikibi Jinchuriki appeared in a small cyclone of sand as Lee jumped down to join Gaara at the bottom, but the Suna team and the other Jinchuriki were on the edge as they looked down at the crazy sand user. With the Jinchuriki ready to jump down if Gaara started to let his beast out. Naruto-san, may I ask why you were like this? Guy asked him as Naruto looked out of the corner of his eye. Gaara is what happens when a Jinchuriki goes off the deep end and lives in the darkness, Naruto said as Guy's eyes shot wide. Lee heard what Naruto had said as he looked at Gaara before narrowing his eyes as he grabbed the cork from the gourd that was shot his way. Please don't rush things, Lee said to Gaara. Hayate smiled slightly at Lee before raising his hand. May the 18th match begin, Hayate called out. At that, Lee jumped forward with a kick, but sand rose around Gaara, defending him, so Lee moved in fast with another kick but had the same result as Naruto looked on. How is he controlling the sand? Sakura asked as Naruto, who was still watching the match, explained. It's his Jinchuriki ability, Naruto told her as she looked at him. As you know, each Jinchuriki have an ability. I can sense negative emotions, as we've seen with Han. He can use boil release, Naruto said as Sakura nodded along. I can make all fire release jutsu stronger, and when I do, the fire turns blue. B-sensei can make ink, Yugito added as Sakura nodded. I have a strong water release and can make coral, while Utakata-sensei can make acid, Camaran added as Sakura took the information in. I can use bug jutsu, and if I remember right, the Yonbi had a strong lava release, Fu added as she walked over. So does Lee have a change? Sakura asked the Jinchuriki. But all she got was silence. And what shocked people more was that Han and Roshi appeared with the other Jinchuriki. Thank you, Uzumaki-san, Roshi said to Naruto as Naruto looked at him with a raised brow as Lee moved out of the way of a tendril of sand. What for? Naruto asked him as he returned his gaze to the match as the 8 Jinchuriki stood together. Thank you for spearing my student when you had all the right to slitting her thought, Roshi said as everyone looked at him. When Mu-sama ordered the attack on Uzu, my older brother and I was the current Tsuchikage Onoki tried to persuade him to not and ask them to step out of the war, Roshi said as Artemis looked at him. Still, he looked down, but Mu-sama was persuasive, and I regret with my brother what Iwa had done to Uzu, Roshi told him as he pulled out a scroll and handed it to Naruto. Naruto looked at the scroll before looking at his mother, who nodded, so Naruto accepted the scroll. Thank you for your truthful words, Naruto said as he turned back to the match to see that Lee was kneeling on the statue. Lee, take them off, Guy shouted as everyone looked confused as they saw Lee look over to Guy. But Guy-sensei, you said never to do that unless I was defending lives precious to me, Lee asked him, but Guy smiled at him, and Naruto swore he saw a sun behind the man. Lee laughed as he rolled down his leg warmers to show that he had weights on. Leg weights, Naruto thought. Oh, that's good, I can move freely now, Lee said as he held onto the weights. Before dropping them, there's no way that a few weights will let you keep up with Gaara's sand, Temari thought, but that was soon replaced by a shocked look once the weights landed, making a loud bang, and the weights left creators in the ground. Artemis said as his eye twitched as she looked at the weights. Why does he have an elephant's worth of weight on each leg? She asked him as the other Genin's eyes shot wide. Guy laughed at that, seemingly forgetting that Artemis was a goddess for a second. Now go, Lee, Guy told his student. Yes, sir, Lee called out before disappearing and reappeared behind Gaara. The sand just managed to catch a punch heading to Gaara, along with 2 more punches and a kick, before Lee disappeared again and delivered an axe kick. And the kick landed. Lee, like me, picked up a rare chakra disease that messes with us so that we have a small amount of chakra, and my father did not have the money to pay for my operation, and as Tsunade-sama is not here anymore, Lee could not have it either, Guy said as Artemis and a few other nodded, so I trained Lee purely on taijutsu, he informed the goddess. I see, so the weights, Artemis asked him. Gaara looked up at Lee, showing he now had a cut on his cheek from Lee's sandal. As per Lee's request, I triple the weights each time he gets accustomed to them, Guy told her as she nodded. He then turned to Lee. Now, Lee, show the power of youth, Guy called out as he crouched down. Yes, sir, Lee called out again as he rocketed at Gaara. Lee then disappeared and reappeared behind Gaara once more, and as the sand user turned to face him, Lee was not there. He was in front of Gaara once more, and he delivered a strong punch that took Gaara off his feet and a few feet back before the sand attacked Lee, but the boy moved out of the way, but a sound filled the room. It sounded like something cracking as things started to fall off Gaara. "This is bad," Kankuro said as Temari and Baki nodded. It was Gaara's face that was cracking. Or, to be more accurate, it was a layer over Gaara's face made out of a sand-like armor that was cracking and falling to the floor and showed that Gaara had a deranged smile on his face. The Jinchuriki was getting ready to jump down with Yugito's nails becoming claws, Camaran holding her trident, Rochi's skin started to head up along with Han's armor, Utakata had pulled out a blowpipe, Fu had formed her wings, B taking hold of one of his swords and Naruto as the points of his chains sticking out of his body. The sand rose once more, but this time over Gaara, and started to fix the armor. It also covered up the deranged smile like it was never there in the first place. "Is that all?" Gaara asked Lee, who looked shocked then saw that Guy had nodded at him. Hence, he started to undo the bandages that covered his arms. "Guy, please tell me that you did not teach this boy the," Artemis asked him, but Guy nodded. "I did, and with Lee having no one, I took him in and did what my father did," Guy told her as Artemis closed her eyes before looking at him. "Does he knows the risks?" she asked him as Guy nodded, "and he has accepted them," Artemis asked as Guy nodded again. "Come on, hurry up," Gaara told Lee, who glared and was running around Gaara at high speed. "As you wish," Lee said as he landed a kick to Gaara's chin sending him into the air. "That's not all," Lee called out as he repeatedly kicked Gaara into the air higher and higher away from Gaara's sand. "Genin," Artemis called out as they all turned to her, "watch, and you shall see the pinnacle of taijutsu and know that even if Gaara somehow services this attack, he would not come out of this uninjured as this is one of the strongest taijutsu," she told them as they all looked back to the match as Guy closed his eyes in prayer. "I can't take my eyes off him even if I'm hurt," Lee thought as he winched, but he fought to keep his eyes open. Soon he was behind Gaara with the bandages wrapped around Jinchuriki before he tightened them, and then Lee started to spin them at a great speed as they headed for the ground. "Omit Renge," Lee called out as they both hit the ground before Lee jumped out of the way as Gaara lay on the floor with cracks forming over his body. But he was slowly getting up, but the armor fell off him, showing everyone that Gaara was covered with small cuts from the stones on the ground, and Lee was winching. "What's the matter with Lee?" Sakura asked. "It's the Omit Renge kid," Roshi said as she turned to him and found that the Jinchuriki had arranged themselves according to the number of tails they held, with Naruto standing next to her. "It's a strong taijutsu technique," Utakata added as she turned to him. "But it's a double-edged sword for the user as it puts a lot of strain on the body with how fast they move," B explained to her, again not rapping just to tell Sakura how serious this was. "As of right now, Lee is just a mass of pain and weakness," Kuranai said as Sakura turned to the red-eyed woman. "But that is slightly fortunate that even if Gaara is a Jinchuriki, he's in the same boat as Lee," Asuma finished off as his three students turned to him. "So what's going to happen now?" Ino asked as she looked down at Lee before she saw Lee gain a smile along with Guy. "Why is he smiling?" Neji asked as he looked down at the field. "He's going to lose," he added, but Guy laughed. "He's about to push Gaara back soon," Guy said as everyone turned to him. Kakashi's visible eye widened as the conversation between Guy and Artemis went through his head. "The lotus of Konoha will bloom a second time," he told them as Lee crossed his arm in front of his face, and Gaara looked confused. "Guy, you taught him the 8 gates," Kakashi shouted at Guy as Kuranai and Asuma's eyes shot wide and looked at Guy with equal shock. "Yes, that's right," Guy said as people looked shocked. And confused. "He has the talent," Guy said, but Asuma cut him off. "It does not matter if he has a talent for it. You taught him something horribly dangerous and forbidden," Asuma said as people turned to him. "The Ura Renge is something that should not be taught. It's at the top of list, in fact," he added as Kakashi and Kuranai nodded. "This I know, but I would not teach it to him if he did not have the skill for it," Guy said as he looked down at Lee. "And so no matter what you all say, I know that I did the right thing for my student as Lee has the same drive I do, and the same self-rule," Guy said as Kakashi and the Konoha sensei looked away from the man. "How many gates can he open?" Kakashi asked him as Kuno looked down. "What are the 8 gates?" she asked Naruto, who looked at her. He can go to Toman, Guy said as Utakata turned to Chojuro. Chojuro watched closely as this fight is going to show how the Kiri no Shinobigatana Shichen and Shu lost to one man, he told his student, who nodded and waited with bated breath. What are you talking about? What are the 8 gates? Sakura asked them. The 8 gates are a set of limiters set on the body, Kuranai said as she looked down at Lee as chakra started to form around him. And in order to perform the Uru Renge, you must release the first 3 of the limiters, Asuma added as rocks started to float around Lee. Remove the limiters, both Sakura and Kuno asked them. There are 8 points in the body that are called gates that are on the chakra network that is called Kaiman the gate of opening, Kuman the gate of rest, Simon the gate of life, Shoman the gate of pain, Toman the gate of closing, Kaiman the gate of joy, Kyoman the gate of shock and Shimon the gate of death, Kakashi said as he showed his Sharingan. These gates limit the amount of chakra flowing through the body, and by opening the gates, the user can draw power 10 times what they normally can do even if the body is destroyed afterwards, Roshi added. When the user uses Omit Renge, the first gate is opened, Guy told Sakura, and unknowingly Kuno, and to start performing the Uru Renge, he will need to open the 3rd gate, and at this moment, he has the 2nd gate open as well, Guy told her as she looked down at Lee. But with how Lee is at the moment shows how much of a double-edged sword this technique is, Kakashi said as he looked at Sakura. The state and technique where all 8 gates have been opened is called Hachiman Tonko no Jin, and anyone who uses that technique will, no matter how brief, active power that surpasses the power of the 5 cage, Kakashi told her as she looked shocked. No one said anything as Naruto turned to him, as more chakra started to form around Lee. What's the downside? He asked. They'll die from power overload as they moment literally meet the power of the gods, and it burns them up, Artemis said as Guy sighed. Naruto, you have helped me, and you are like me and yet you have beaten fate, so know this, that if I do fall, I will make sure that you can help him. Lee thought as a picture of him and Naruto laughing in his mind formed. As steam started to come off his skin, Guy-sensei watch as I develop my Nindo, Lee said in his mind as he flung both arms out as his skin turned red. Simon the gate of life, release, Lee called out as Gaara looked shocked at Lee, even if I fall here, I will aid others in taking you down. Shoman the gate of pain release, Lee called out as he released more power from him, but blood started to fall from his nose. He then once more rocketed at Gaara, but this time he was faster, and when he moved, he destroyed the ground beneath him. No one bar the goddess could track him as Lee kicked Gaara in the chin and sent Gaara into the air. As the sand came up to defend him, Lee wanted none of that as he zoomed around, punching and kicking Gaara all over the place in the air. Toman the gate of closing, release, Lee called out as he zoomed in on Gaara once more as Neji looked at Lee. You are no longer my rival, Neji, as I have found someone better for me to fight, so watch as I was going to use this on you, Lee thought. Lee delivered a punch to Gaara's chest that sent Gaara crashing to the ground, but the Jinchuriki failed to notice that Lee had wrapped bandages around his waist. Lee then pulled the banged up to him as Gaara was dragged along. The sand can't keep up, Temari thought as she saw Gaara helpless in the air. This is not good, she added. Lee could feel his consciousness slipping as he got ready to deliver his last attack. I'm sorry that I could not fight you in the finals, Naruto, but if you face Gaara, I will make sure that not even the Ikibi will heal this attack. Lee thought as he moved a leg by his fist that held the bandage, and as Gaara moved higher Lee punched and kicked him at the same time. Uru Renge, Lee called out before he fell unconscious in the air. Gaara landed on the ground, but his gourd turned to sand as it cushioned his fall. Gaara looked up at the unconscious Lee in the air as his eyes changed from green to yellow irides and pupils, each taking the shape of a black 4-pointed star with 4 black dots around it. He slowly got up and held his hand out, but before he could do anything to Lee, the Jinchuriki jumped in. Yugito had long claws covered in blue flames pointed at the back of Gaara's neck as her eyes were not her normal color. Her right eye was yellow, and the left was green. Camaran had her trident pointed at Gaara's chest as it trickled with water, and her eyes were now red with yellow pupils. Roshi and Han had locked their legs around Gaara's to stop him from moving, with Roshi's leg covered in lava and Han's armor giving off steam. And like the others, their eyes had also changed, with Roshi's eyes having yellow irides and white pupils and Han's turning to dark blue-green. Utakata had put Lee in a bubble that held the unconscious boy, and his eyes were completely black. Fu was in the air with orange-red eyes as she looked down at Gaara with a jutsu ready to defend Lee. While no one could see B's eyes, they saw he had a sword to Gaara's neck. And Naruto had his golden gains out as his rippled eyes were now red with a slit. No one said a word as Gaara looked at his siblings of burden as they were all ready to take him out, and something told him that he must stand down. And for once, he listened to it. But he could not help but ask, "Why are you helping him?" Gaara asked them as they saw he did not know what they were doing. "Bloodshed is unnecessary on this day," Yugito said as Gaara looked at her. "This day is to see if we can show the power that we hold," Camaran added as Gaara turned his head to her. "For villages to come and be won," Roshi said as Gaara looked at him. "And for us to put aside grievances," Han piped up as Gaara turned to him. "But do not mistake us, brother," Utakata told him as the bubble that held Lee floated over Gaia as Gaara looked at Utakata. Fu then flew closer to the ground. "If you decide to take his life," she said as she formed a seal. Then, as the only interloper in Konoha, B told him as lighting started to form over his sword. "We will take you from my fox den and make sure that you do not see the light of day for a while." Naruto finished as all the ninja did not see the Jinchuriki. No, they saw the Biju. Gaara looked at them for a while before his eyes turned to normal. "Never mind," he said as the sand beneath them turned back into his gourd. "Winner Gaara of the desert," Hayate called out as Gaara started to walk away. Gaara's team looked at the Jinchuriki. "Are they?" Kankuro asked as Baki nodded. "Yes," he said as both his students looked at him, "and the Kyubi Jinchuriki is the one that found out that Gaara was here," Baki told as both students looked shocked. All the Jinchuriki bar Yugito was left as Hayate looked at her. "It's only me and that boy up there that are left," she told him to prove her right. The board had the names. Choji Akamaiki vs Yugito ni. Choji met Yugito at the bottom as Omoi looked at his teammates and found that Karui was looking at Choji. "He looks cute," she thought as she looked at him. "May the final match of the preliminary matches begin," Hayate called out as he jumped back. Choji made a seal similar to the bird seal as his body got bigger. "Go, Choji, roller her over," Ino yelled out. Yugito crouched down as her body gained blue flames over it. "Are you going to be my cat toy?" Yugito asked him as Choji started rolling at her. "Nikuden Sensha," Choji called out as he rolled at Yugito. But the Jinchuriki jumped over the ball by the name of Choji and rolled into a wall. And got stuck. Choji thought as he tried to roll out of the wall, but Yugito descended on him, shrouded in blue flames, and her fist cocked back. "Juiken," Yugito called out as she sent a blast out of her fist in the form of a lion's head that rammed into Choji, and when Yugito cut her attack off, everyone found Choji knocked out. "I think you went overboard there, kitten," Yugito heard Matabi in her head said as she looked at her opponent. "Winder Yugito ni," Hayate called out. Medics took Choji away. "May all the 17 finalists come down here," Hiruzen called out. The others walked down to meet Yugito at the bottom as Anko walked out with a box with a hole in it. "The next stage of the Chunin exams will start in 2.5 months, but as of right now, we need to know who you are going to be fighting," Hiruzen said as Anko started to walk around. "Now I would like for people who fought to come and pull out a number," he informed them as Anko walked over to Kakashi who was pulling for Sasuke. "Sasuke has the number 2, Kakashi said as he pulled out a ball with the number 2 on it. Anko walked over to Fu. "I got 9, she said as someone wrote down the names. "I have 3, Shino said after he pulled out his ball. Samui was the next person, and she called out, 5. Sakura was next and then saw the number before saying, 9, as Fu smiled at her. "I got 4, Shikamaru said as she yawned. Kankuro was next before saying, 3. After him was Tenten, who pulled out the number 8 before Chojuro pulled out his, 6, he said as someone nodded. Shizuka was next, and she pulled out, 7, she called out. Guran pulled out hers and called, 8, before she and Tenten locked eyes. 4, Temari said as Shikamaru looked at her before swearing under her breath. Camaran was the next one who looked over to Shizuka. "It seems that we will fight," she said as she showed the ball to Shizuka, which showed the number 7. As Anko walked away, "It seems your old number is back," the Three Tails said to her. "Yay," Camaran said back. "I got 6, Han said as Chojuro looked at his amour. Naruto pulled his ball and laughed. "Number 1 already," Naruto said. Neji was the next one, and he pulled out the number 1 ball as well. He could feel eyes on him as a dark smile formed on Naruto aimed at him along with the fox on Naruto's shoulder. Gaara then pulled out the number 2, and Yugito looked at Samui and held the number 5. So the matches of the next round of the Chunin exams are the following. Hayate called out as everyone turned to him. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki vs Neji Hyuga, Sasuke Uchiha vs Gaara of the Desert, Shino Aburame vs Kankuro of Suna, Shikamaru Nara vs Temari of Suna, Yugito Ni vs Samui of Kumo, Han of Iwa vs Chojuro of Kiri, Camaran Yuminohara vs Shizuka of Nadeshiko Village, Tenten of Konoha vs Guran of Kusa, and finally Sakura Haruno vs Fu of Taki. Hayate finished as he took a breath. You will meet in the Konoha arena in 2.5 months, Hiruzen said as everyone nodded. Now then, go off and train and bring honor to your homes, he told them as the sensei started to lead the genin out. World of the Gods, United States of America, New York, Montauk, Northeastern Long Island, Camp Halfblood, the Big House. Centaur walked through a red-painted house and went up to the attic. The centaur was a middle-aged man from the waist up, with thinning brown hair, bushy eyebrows, intense brown eyes and a scruffy beard, with his lower half as a white stallion. He wore a white dress shirt with a red and gold striped tie, a black jumper, and a frayed tweed jacket. He entered the attack, walked over to a mummified woman, and looked at her with a heavy heart. What is to happen next? He asked the mummy. The mummy came to life as it spewed out green mist from its mouth and took the shape of 6 people. The first was a 9-year-old girl with mousy brown hair and fire-red eyes. She was dressed in a plain brown dress. Son of the maiden shall arrive, she said before going silent. The second was another woman that looked to be in their early 20s, had long blonde hair the color of ripe wheat, and wore a bright green dress with a dark cape, which gave her the appearance of fresh plant shoots breaking through fertile earth whenever she moved, and on her head, she wore a crown of woven corn leaves and adornments of poppies. Daughter of lightning returns alive, she told him before going silent. The last of them was a beautiful woman who looked to be just going out of her 20s, with silver hair braided over one shoulder. She wore a dress that shimmered with colors like peacock feathers. Hate for the gods is born, she told him. The next that spoke was a very tall, imposing and very muscular man with albino white skin, intense black eyes and shoulder-length black hair, with bangs usually covering most of his forehead and wearing black flowing robes. The camp will be torn, he told him. The next one looked like Poseidon. A ninja shall lend aid, he told him before the centaur turned to the last one. He was tall, imposing, and very muscular, with shoulder-length black hair and a gray and black neatly trimmed beard with brilliant electrically blue eyes, with a serious and proud, but very handsome face, and his attire was a dark blue pinstriped suit. And the sea's choice has been made, he told him before the people returned to the green smoke as the centaur wrote all of what they said him down. Biju equals tailed beast. Mangekyo Sharingan equals kaleidoscope copy wheel eye. Kamedachi no Jutsu equals sickle weasel technique. Shikyaku no Jutsu equals 4 legs technique. Jujin Bunshin equals beast human clone. Supernuru Samakogo equals supernal shark empress. Boritekusu Karashu equals vortex crash. Suiten Suiryuden no Jutsu equals water release, water dragon bullet technique. Yoten Sekaigyo no Jutsu equals lava release, quicklime congealing technique. Kaden Gokaku no Jutsu equals fire release, great fireball technique. Bansho Tenon equals heavenly attraction of all creation. Ryu no Kyubi equals dragon's neck. Omid Renge equals front lotus. Ura Renge equals reverse lotus. Kiri no Shinobigatana Shichinen Shu equals 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. Sharingan equals copy wheel eye. Hachiman Tonko no Jin equals 8 gates released formation. Nikuden Sensha equals human bullet tank. Juakin equals beast king fist. That's it for part 3 of Naruto meets his mother and unlocks a new summon. If you're enjoying this emotional and power-filled alternate timeline, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Naruto What If fanfics. Comment below, what kind of summon should Naruto unlock next? See you in part 4.